everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Laundry List. And today we have Charles, and we call him Chip. And he is a product manager at Google Cloud. And before joining Google, he did his MBA from Teva School of Business. And we also have our co-host Rahil. And with this, I'll pass it on to Chip to give his introduction, and we will then ask him some questions about Google and what was his past experience. So yeah, Chip.
Yeah, I'll do a quick self-introduction. So my name is Chip Herman. I'm currently a product manager at Google Cloud. We're going to talk a lot more about that. I just finished a few months ago my MBA at Carnegie Mellon. Before doing my MBA, I was working for a small satellite imagery startup in Ithaca, New York called Ursa Space Systems. And we primarily focused on geospatial intelligence. A lot of customers in the finance and energy sectors doing some really cool stuff with satellite imagery. And before that, I actually worked for a little bit in finance in New York, kind of in a compliance role, but was able to pivot to product management at the startup and then kind of hone those skills at Carnegie Mellon.
Very, very cool, Chip. I think we can start from your experience working at the satellite company. So not very deeply, but if you can explain how the transition was from working for a startup and then moving into one of the biggest organization in the world. So how does that feel?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to talk about the transition. I think one of the ways was that when I first joined the startup of about 40 people, I was actually a sales engineer. So I wasn't in product management at all. I'd heard about it a little bit through different friends. I knew I was interested at this kind of cornerstone of technology and business. So I wouldn't want to be entirely technical, but I wanted to have a little bit of touch on that technology. And so for the first couple of months at that job, I was doing mostly sales work. I was talking to customers. I was managing pipelines of customers. I was trying to evaluate deals. I was on the phone all the time, trying to get a hold of people. And I think that was a very helpful experience for my, ultimate product manager career, because it meant that I no longer had this fear of getting on the phone with customers and talking to people and kind of understanding their problems and being able to kind of get very direct feedback on what we were doing well, what we could do better. And so I think that was a good transition for me from there. And then the transition from a 40-person company to one of the largest organizations on the world has been really interesting. I think there's lots of advantages to the kind of scale that a company like Google provides just for resources internally. There's so many tools and pages and documentation and just a huge amount of wonderful people who are helpful. And I think there's a lot of advantages to that, but there's a lot of advantages to a small company where you can just go tap on the shoulder of the engineers who run the entire platform. And there's 4 of them. And you can walk over to their desks and talk about what their main priorities are in ways that are much more difficult at the scale of Google. And even just talking to customers was very easy for a small startup because you only have a couple of customers, whereas at Google, you have many customers, or they're very large and they're difficult to navigate because if a customer of yours is also 10,000 people, who do you talk to for the right conversations to get feedback, to get deals going? And just I think that there's so many different advantages and disadvantages to both that it's hard to say if one's better.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think I can relate it to that as well. And Yashasvi did something similar in her internship, talking to a lot of customers and doing customer profiling. Why don't you also talk about it, Yashasvi?
Yeah, Rahil, I was working at Intuit as a product manager during the summers, and there I was working on their platform TurboTax, and that was a very interesting project because what we were trying to do was to engage customers all year around, because tax filing is something where customers only focus on from January to April, and it was a very critical problem for Intuit, because once the customer has gone from the platform and they're not coming back, the chances of them coming back on the platform for the next year taxes are very low. So I was just trying to understand this problem. For that, I did a couple of usability testings and also spoke with customers. And one of the interesting things which I did was I did usability testings with my friends. That was the place where I started. Obviously, they signed an NDA and everything. So that was quite interesting. And the most fun part about being a PM is talking to customers and getting their reactions.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. I think Chip, for you as well, starting from that grassroots level, talking to all those customers, starting from the sales perspective is I think that's one of the best ways a PM can start working and grow from there. This is super interesting, and I'm sure it'll be very helpful for everyone to hear. Why don't we like talk about like initial few months? I think like it's already been like a couple of months or probably more than that for you at Google. So like how was onboarding? Anything like as a Noogler, how do you feel interesting things that you have experienced so far?
Yeah, Google as a company has the wonderful terminology that new Googlers, we all call ourselves Googlers, are new Googlers are Nooglers. And so you have to get used to this funny jargon and this way that people talk about themselves. So I think I'm still a Noogler at 3 months, and there's people I've talked to who have been at the company for 15 years. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm still a Noogler, I'm still onboarding, I'm still learning things. And what's fun about at least being in the cloud organization of Google is that everything really is very new. It's like being in a very fast-paced kind of growth stage startup that has really accelerated over only the last 5 or 6 years, just because the company was later to kind of enter the cloud market. And I think my onboarding has been really thorough so far. I think they have a wonderful process in place that's very structured, where the first month or so you have your what is it called? The GTI, which is your Google Tech kind of immersion, which is like this wonderful program where you're not working on your core projects with your team yet. You have another group of people who are also joining Google at the same time in your cohort, and you get to work on a kind of mock project together. And they put some PMs together with some program managers, with some software engineers, with some user kind of researchers or UX designers. It's really kind of a wonderful way to kind of just dip your toes into the water, very kind of gently ease into what are the names of all these systems, where do I go for resources, what is the data called, how do I go access it, what is the kind of cadence of work in different stages, what kind of documentation do we use. And it's a really wonderful way to kind of onboard, because everyone else is new too. And so you can ask kind of all your naive questions about like, how do I go find this resource? Who do I talk to for getting my parking validated? And like all these things of like, what's this document supposed to look like? Where is this template? So that's wonderful to have this kind of much more formalized onboarding process at Google. And I've really appreciated that at the scale and resources of Google, because at the small startup I was working for, there was no onboarding process. It was just, you're working now and here's all the things we needed to do and go figure it out. Which again is kind of fun, but it's not what you want to do all the time, perhaps. So the kind of more structured approach was really helpful. And then just from my team, they've been really wonderful in answering all of my questions. I'm new to cloud computing as a field, and so they've kind of brought me on for a reason, and they wanted me to kind of come in and look at things with fresh perspective. And they'll teach me all the technical stuff, but they really want me to kind of come in and use all those skills I honed from sales of talking to customers and communicating well in both writing and verbally, and really kind of thinking higher level about, okay, we have these products and we can make a couple of incremental advances to them, but what's the strategy? Where should we really be going with these? Why should we do this? Why not? Is also a very valuable question. So my team has been wonderful for that onboarding process as well. But I think no matter how many years I'll be at Google, I think I'll always be onboarding.
That sounds very intense. And Chip, why don't you talk about like the project you're working on? That will be also helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So this is all with the caveat that I'm very new to cloud. So if I get anything wrong with somebody with much more experience in cloud computing, please forgive me and let me know. But I work on Compute Engine, which is part of the compute side of cloud computing. So cloud computing can be put into mostly three main buckets. You have storage, so think Google Drive, iCloud, where you upload files to the cloud and they sit there. The compute side of things, which is you're renting computing power, or you're renting computers that then do other workloads or use databases for you. So you're renting that kind of power side of things, and then networking, which is also kind of understanding your company's kind of IT systems and how all of them talk to each other, and also kind of virtual networks. And admittedly, it is the part of cloud that I know least about, and I'm still working on that. But I've kind of gone more deeply into the compute side of things. So Compute Engine is part of what we call infrastructure as a service. And so you might hear that everything is a service now. As a service is very trendy within the tech industry. But it does make a lot of sense, because what we provide to the customers is really the hardware, the infrastructure. And the analogy I use is that really we're renting people a blank computer. So it's really when you go into, go online to buy your computer, you buy, a MacBook or an HP computer, but it has an operating system on it. It has software preloaded. When you're just doing infrastructure as a service for the Compute Engine, you just get the blank hardware. And on top of that, you can bring your own operating system. You can purchase one through Google that we're a reseller of, whether it's Windows or Linux. You can then purchase or bring your own software on top of that if you want to run things like MongoDB or SQL Server, or you want to host a website. You can bring all of that with you. And the kind of real value proposition of infrastructure as a service is that you don't have to constantly update your hardware, all those kind of firmware updates. You don't have to store it in the basement of your company. You don't have to make sure that it's secure, it's safe. You don't have to worry about people getting access to it at the physical location. It's all just stored in the cloud. And one of the main benefits of that is that in the cloud, we can scale your infrastructure up and down as much as you like, which is one of the advantages of virtual machines, which is what we offer on top of the infrastructure, where it's not just a single computer with a single hard drive that might be 500 gigs with 4 gigs of RAM. It's virtualized. So think of it like a data center is one giant computer, and we carve up little bits of memory that you get to use. And we carve up this amount of storage space for your computer. So from the outside, if you accessed it via the internet, it looks just like a normal computer. It would be, oh, you have a 500 gigabyte hard drive. It's 4 gigs of memory. So from the outside, it's virtualized to look just the same and operate the same way. But you can scale it down when you don't need to. You can scale it all the way up if you need a little bit more computing power. It's very flexible in that way. So one of the big advantages of infrastructure as a service is for customers who already have a very large, very sophisticated tech stack, and they're cloud curious, but they don't want to change things too fast. And so what they do is we have this whole process for migrating to the cloud. We call it lift and shift. So you're essentially copy and pasting everything you have in your servers on your on-premise, in your company, at your data center, and you load it into the cloud, and it should run exactly the same way. And so that's the first stage of kind of customers going to the cloud. And that's a lot of what our team works on.
That's very cool. So I think the one takeaway for me to the whole thing was that the whole thing, the whole complicated environment for like cloud storage, or like the fancy terms people use, like you can break it down into 3 things broadly, as you mentioned. One is storage, one is the compute part, and one is the networking piece. And that's like really good for me to like understand. So I think that's a very good segue. So as a PM, like you tend to work with like so many different teams, and in this case, because like this is super technical, and like there are like 3-legged approach to this. So if you can like elaborate a little bit more on how you work with different teams, because I think when you're like signing a new client, or like anyone trying to move to cloud, the first thing is to like get all your data in the cloud, and then you might avail the compute services that you're offering, and probably like then it might move to like networking as well. So yeah, like how do you work with all these different teams within Google?
Very carefully is kind of the short answer. But really at the scale of Google, it's interesting how that scale has advantages, because we have so many intelligent people who have so much experience in this, but there's so many people who could be working on this problem that sometimes it's too many people are involved, and then sometimes it's hard to find the right team or the right owner of this product, where if you're working on one thing, you say, okay, wait, this was built about 4 years ago. Who do I talk to? Oh, well, they're no longer at the company. Well, who else can I go find? Who's like looking at this? Who has actual permissions to change this for me? But I think there's a lot of kind of coordination once you get a nice business rhythm when you're onboarding new customers. So for us, we're looking at like planning for next year, and we're trying to think about, okay, what kinds of things do customers really want? How can we improve this whole journey for them? So we kind of go to the customers and we say, hey, tell us about your problems. Tell us what you really like to see. Tell us where we can really help you out. And then once we gather all that information from either our current account teams, from the kind of product operations teams who work very closely directly with customers, from a lot of customer engineers, from solution managers. Solution managers are after a company has signed a contract that, yes, we want to go to Google Cloud, solutions engineers will help them figure out exactly which products they need, how do they implement them. And it's really kind of like a more like white glove service, which is great. But there's all these different people who have one small piece of the puzzle of like, this person has the sales perspective and they're talking to future potential customers. This person's talking to people who just joined and they have their own migration pain points. And then there's customers who are very mature, who have been working with our product operations teams for so long that we have a good relationship with them. We can kind of talk to the main stakeholders there. And then from there, looking at people who do market research, what's happening with other companies in this space, looking at kind of where technology is going, what new things are being developed that we can help with customers, that it definitely is a challenge and something I'm still navigating for finding who those right stakeholders are, kind of who has which pieces of the puzzle. But I think part of being a good product manager is just kind of being able to fit those pieces together and not giving up. Like, okay, this person didn't have the right answer for me, but maybe they know someone who does. And most of my conversations end with, and who else should I be talking to? Like, who else do you think would have good perspective on this? And then when you have that conversation with the next person, you say, who should I be talking to? And they might answer like with another person. And so that way you both build your own network, but you also have this really nice kind of contact list of expertise you can use in the future.
Yeah, like, go ahead, Yashasvi.
Yeah, so you mentioned about different teams you collaborate with. You collaborate with market research, operations, like these are your stakeholders in the company. What are the customers of the virtual machine or like infrastructure as a service at Google? Like, if you can broadly talk about the market you are targeting, are these people like me, like normal personal computer users, or like they are businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of different sized customers that we deal with. So there might be somebody like you, Yashaswi, where you can go onto Google Cloud tonight and you can go sign up with an account, you can put in a credit card, and you can create a project, and that's it. You're done. You're ready to go. There's even a free trial, which you can go take advantage of. I forget for how much, but it won't charge you after until you hit a certain amount. But we do have plenty of customers like that. Maybe you're a developer and you just want to test something. You're interested, you want to develop some skills in the cloud, you want to go poke around and see how you'd run things, what it looks like. You can do that as an individual. You don't even have to be a company. There are plenty of startups who are kind of growing, and many startups currently are what we call cloud native. And so they want to use all the latest tools that are offered as first party offerings from all the major cloud providers, which means that a lot of them have a lot more infrastructure behind it. So with my buying your own personal computer analogy, I don't buy my computer just to have the hardware. I don't usually care. I care that it runs the software I want. I care that it has Microsoft Excel. Like, that's really what I want to run. So the sophisticated kind of smaller kind of cloud native customers who are coming on board at that part in their journey, they'll just buy Excel and they don't care about the hardware. We handle all of that for them for a managed fee. And so it's a really kind of interesting place where they're in. And then we have, in addition to those smaller, maybe growth stage startups, we have on the other end, very large companies, like big companies around the world in all different sectors. And they have been, very successful over the last couple of decades, and they have a huge tech stack, and they have their own servers, and they have decades of tech debt and systems talking to each other. And disentangling all of those to move to the cloud is such a burden for them that they wanted to say, I don't want to change anything. I just want you to save my hardware costs. So that's why they want to lift and shift, copy and paste everything to the cloud. And then from there, we can start talking about, well, okay, you're in the cloud now. Like, you have everything up there. Now we can start disentangling these. Maybe we change one of these services. Maybe we kind of move this one to be a little bit more flexible, or go to an open source solution, or even a closed source solution if it's better for you. And so there are rather large customers who, that's kind of the fun part, where you get to solve this very challenging problem that has, this company has built this tech stack for 40, 50, 60 years, and now you get to change very carefully and kind of bring them more into like the managed services side. They only care about the end results, right? They don't want to know how it's managed, or all the different software layers beneath it. They don't want to update all the firmware. They just want it to work. And working on that side of the journey is another aspect that my team works on. But that's kind of the scale of customers. It's really everything in between.
Very cool. I have like one very interesting question for you, which like I also think about like every day. I still don't know the answer to it. So like, when you have a situation like this where you have so many different variety of customers, and like there might be like a set of customers who are like really big, and obviously they're driving like a lot of value to the company. They are like doing big in numbers. So how do you balance like creating white glove solution for them, and also generic solutions which like apply to like all the merchants? So like, how do you prioritize that?
That's a really wonderful question. I think I'm at least learning how that prioritization happens right now. I think there are a lot of things that every customer wants and needs. So every customer needs security. They want to know that all of their stuff is secure. They're not vulnerable to phishing scams or other kinds of cyber attacks. So they want security. Everybody wants reliability. They want uptime. They want it to be always available. And then there's a couple other things like that that everyone wants when they come to the cloud. Security, reliability, especially. And so I think those are things that whenever there's a way we can improve that for customers, that's a no-brainer. That says, yes, absolutely, every customer segment, every persona wants these things. And then from there, there's a couple of different ways we segment it out for kind of larger companies or smaller companies. Sometimes there are similar pain points where, oh, you'll notice that this same piece of software that runs at the very top is not working just the right way for small companies and big companies. It's the same piece of software. It just might be that one company has one virtual machine running and the other one has thousands. But if it's all running the same software where there's a vulnerability discovered and we have to update it, then that's also a no-brainer. It solves a problem for everyone. From there, it is a kind of delicate balancing act of, okay, this is a really large customer. They really want this feature. They really need this to happen. They really need this piece of software to work. And I think that there's a very complicated dance of tying it to, you want to increase, customer satisfaction, you want to increase customer usage on the platform, you're trying to balance revenue, but you're also trying to balance how much you expand into the market. So do you create features that make your current customers happy, or do you prioritize features that might make future customers happy? And that's why they hire PMs and why they haven't automated this at this point. That's why we're all important, is because we answer those very difficult strategic decisions, not always correctly. There's definitely mistakes, or there's ways that we could always improve. But I think that's one of the main benefits of having people who have this really funny background for product managers is that you get to think in lots of different ways for what the strategy should be, where should we go. There's a lot of uncertainty involved, and the day that companies can automate that into an Excel sheet, then we're all out of a job. So hopefully that doesn't come too soon at this point. But really kind of trying to balance all those things. There's no easy answer, and I think companies big and small all have that challenge, and that's why it's a very exciting place to be in the same way.
Yeah, that's so true. And one of the key challenges you might have when you're working with variety of customers is like measuring the success. Like, how do you what metrics to see, and how the matrix is different for every customer. So how do you see is your product performing well or not? Like, any key metrics you track?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of metrics that I think are pretty common across the cloud space. I think one would just be usage. So how much processing power are they consuming across all of our different services? Another one you could think of would be kind of the variety of products. So if a customer is using a lot of compute engine for us, and then you realize that, oh, they're using a lot of compute engine, but they really want to run a lot of different kinds of virtual machines in there. Maybe they're always running one OS and you want to diversify it, or you want to get them onto a newer updated version of the operating system and really kind of see how much their usage has changed over time. Has it grown? Has it shrunk? Is there a reason for that? I think looking at kind of the breadth of their consumption is a really nice metric to look at too. And then those are kind of the high level metrics we're looking for, just kind of usage, consumption. It's very difficult to measure customer success, even though it's very important to go talk to customers and kind of get a good sense of that too. But there's all sorts of other metrics that even for certain things, we're trying to see like what workflow are people clicking through, right? If there's an onboarding check section, is there something in our online website that you have to click through several stages? It's just like a marketing sales funnel. Like, how many people get to that third step? How many people get to the fourth step? And how kind of does it break down? And where are those pain points? Like, those are things we measure too. So if there's ways that we could, update a couple of pages, or update some documentation, that would reduce a lot of that kind of friction for customers, that would be wonderful. And then looking at churn too. So how many customers did they churn out? Did they spin down all their VMs and no longer using our services, or they came back and they came back a little bit? And so we're trying to measure how many people churn out and then how many new customers are onboarded. It's kind of a metric of our success month to month. It's tricky, yeah, at this scale, certainly. And how do you define churn? Well, if they scale down to 5% of their usage, can you call that churned out? Like, I don't know, right? That's interesting. We should talk about that. But I think there's a lot of wiggle room for those metrics.
That's yeah, like super cool. I remember we had that class back in the MBA program where we used to talk about like North Star metrics for like different businesses, and I think this is a very interesting like description that you provided. So I think very helpful. So probably I think we are like towards the end of this. Why don't we discuss like some of the challenges that you have faced like so far, and what were some of the things which were like really interesting from like working at Google perspective, and like which helped you in this time?
Yeah, let me think of some challenges recently. I think part of it is trying to get that direct customer feedback. I think it's so many layers of people who are working with some of the larger customers, especially that there are account teams and there are operations teams, and there are kind of the higher level executive teams who might be talking to the CIO or the CEO of some of these companies, trying to make these deals happen. And you don't want to get in the way. You want to help as much as you can, but you don't want to kind of go in to every sales call, because then now the salespeople might want to kind of keep their customers, to themselves. They're trying to make a deal happen, and you're just a PM coming in to derail their conversation. And so I think that there's ways in which you have to even pitch yourself internally of saying, oh, like, here's how I can help you out on this sales call. Like, here's where I think I can provide some value. Like, I think it'd be really helpful for this conversation if a PM came in and really showed that kind of more encouragement and kind of support to customers who might feel like, oh, like Google is sending like PMs to talk to us on the sales call. Like, this is so like luxurious. They really care about us as a customer. And I think there's ways in which it's much more difficult to get that direct customer feedback. And so for some of the things I'm working on, I'm trying to do my own kind of customer validation and value proposition and understand their pain points. And a lot of it is so filtered through so many other conversations that I'm trying to distill out as much as I can directly from the customer as I can. So that's currently a challenge. I think that I'll get better at over time. I'll know some of the kind of customer engineers a little bit more closely. I'll kind of understand what their main priorities are and see if I can kind of get a lot of more of their direct feedback more frequently. So I think that's something that I'm working towards. And then I think other things that are going really well that are really exciting is I feel like I've described my onboarding for Google like learning a language. And I feel like I have learned nouns. I've learned lots of names of systems. I've learned lots of pieces of technology. And only in the last week or so have I learned verbs. I can talk about what they do. How do they connect? What are they important for? And then I was having a call with a few other people, and somebody who was a little bit more senior than I was, who was, I think, maybe 3 levels above me, was like asking a question to me directly. And I was like, oh, I know the answer to this, and I can answer this question. And I formed a maybe 2-sentence response to it in a somewhat comprehensive way. And they kind of responded, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you for explaining that to me. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm learning things. This is like, I spoke about something and I articulated it really well. And then after the call, I went to one of the engineers and like, was that right? Like, did I get that right? And like, no, that was correct. I was like, wow, like, no way. Like, I'm actually learning things. So I think there's a lot of information thrown at us every day for every job we go to. There's so many new systems, there's so many people, and it's so overwhelming with all that you have to learn about the business, about how they operate, about where to find information, about who to talk to, what team, where they're located around the world, that when you start to see that you can actually handle this and like, oh, like, I can do this, like, I was hired for a reason, that sort of imposter syndrome hopefully will start to go away. We're still kind of there, but hopefully it's going to get better over time, and I think it will.
Very interesting, man. Like I have never heard that analogy before of like comparing full learning experience as like learning a new language, but I think it just makes sense. It's a very cool analogy, and like specifically for people like who doesn't come from this background, like doesn't understand like engineering and the works behind this whole thing, to use this thing as a way to like one step at a time and like learning the nouns, the verbs, and like at the end everyone can like form a couple of sentences. And I think that's
Yeah, I have just whole lists of like, I don't know what these terms are, and I have to go kind of look them up in like a dictionary, right? Which is just looking at it on Google. So and then I don't quite have flashcards yet.
yeah,
I might get to that point where I have to quiz myself, but I'm definitely at the point where I've learned a lot of different nouns, and the point at which you start to recognize them again in real conversations feels a lot like learning a language. It's words you've studied and you hear it in real life and you get so excited of, oh, I studied this word. I'm so glad I learned it so I can, understand what this person's talking about. And slowly over time, I think my comprehension, my listening comprehension has improved. We'll get to my speaking ability and my writing ability next, I think.
Very cool. Yeah, I think like the last phase we wanted to touch upon, like, how do you see yourself growing at Google? Probably in the next like 3 or 4 years or more than that. Where do you see yourself going in that environment?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think partly because there's not a single answer I can give you. I think what I want to do, at least for the near term, is really go deep into this product and this problem space that I'm working on right now. And I want to learn as much as I can about one area so I can build that domain expertise where I can confidently articulate problems and solutions for this very narrow set of customers or projects that I'm working on. And then from there, I'm going to look at adjacent areas. I think, okay, I'm still on the same team. I'm still, we still want to make workloads really easy on the platform. What other kinds of workloads can I look at? So my analogy before was customers really want to run Microsoft Excel on their computer. But what about other things? Like, what about Microsoft Word? What about like other pieces of software that people have on their computers? Like, can I apply the same knowledge I've built from working in my area currently and expand it to other areas. And then from there, it's really nice that people in Google move around teams quite a bit, and it's pretty encouraged because you build such a kind of useful, broad experience. So I have plenty of people on my team who've worked in the storage side of things, people who are over networking, who are in an entirely different part of the compute organization, people who have been at the company for 16 years, people who have been here for only 2 years, or people who've been here for 3 months like me, and we're all kind of chatting together, sharing expertise. And I think it's nice to know that even though I'm only here for 3 months, there's things I still bring to the table that somebody who's been here 16 years might not have. There's plenty of stuff that they have that I don't. So I think that recognizing that we're all here for a reason and we all have our own shared expertise and we're all working towards the same goal is really powerful.
Yeah, thank you, Chip, for sharing that. One follow-up question I have is like, what are you learning as a product manager? Because as a PM, you need to know stakeholder management, customer empathy. Is there something particular you're working on right now?
Right now, I think the skill I'm developing is juggling, which is I have like 5 or 6 different projects. I was originally given 3, and now I'm working on 5 or 6 different things. I'm trying in my head to remember, okay, every day I have these 5 or 6 projects. What's one thing I could work on for these? What's like one email I could write that just moves every one of them along a little bit? Like just every day, it's like one email, one chat, one conversation for each of them, just so I can kind of incrementally make progress on all of them. And there are definitely times when I devote more time to a certain project because there's a lot to be done or it's a shorter deadline. But I think being able to manage all those different pieces and understand, there's a really wonderful analogy that people have talked about for kind of managing everything in their life, which is that you're juggling a lot of balls in the air, and some of them are plastic. It's okay if they drop, you can pick them back up, and some of them are glass. And so you have to keep juggling the ones that are glass while still prioritizing the ones that are plastic. So if you're working on, one project and it takes, there's a couple of days where you don't, it doesn't need an update or you're waiting on something else, that's okay. But if there's another one where there's a deadline, you have a presentation, like that one is glass. You don't want to drop that ball. So you want to kind of figure out which ones are okay to drop for a little bit, and that's totally fine, and which ones you can't let fall. And so that's the skill that I'm working on right now.
I think like Satya Nadella or Sundar Pichai spoke about this, like the juggling thing. I don't remember who was it, but even I remember listening to this.
This is like we named this whole thing as laundry list, and it just comes from the same concept that like as a PM you have so many different items like a big laundry list, and you have to always prioritize. So I think it's like a perfect end to this episode. So yeah, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing your experience. Super.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.